right, everybody, it's another episode of Open World Chat. As I used to say all the time, it's the podcast with the video game title that we never talk about video games. I feel a little guilty about that we've taken up that name sometimes. But
Well, it's probably too late to change now. You know what they say about changing horses in midstream. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Card. I'm the co-host.
and I'm John Odom. Thank you for being here. We're gonna have fun today. We're taking on a subject that's really too big for one episode, but we're gonna do what we can in one episode, and that's the idea of identity in
Really,
sci-fi.
I was going to say,
Just
really, you could do a whole pod about this, an
yeah,
entire podcast. I think this is a really interesting topic because it's really as old as literature itself.
hmm
I mean, if you go back to the oldest of mythologies, is reality the way I think it is? Am I who I think I am? Am I who others perceive me to be?
hmm
Those are all basic philosophical questions.
yeah, yeah,
Those are thinking about those things are what produced, Lao Tzu and Socrates and Nietzsche and the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, that's what produces kind of everything that civilization develops eventually starts with who am I and is what I perceive about the universe accurate.
and then
And
there's
so
the
that's really what we're talking about here.
yeah, but there's also another side to that, and that's the concept is more the psychological about the self and the concept of the doppelganger. A lot of times, because a
Sure,
lot of
that
yeah, where Freud, such as he was, would see the concept of the doppelganger as confronting repression, or others would see it as confronting the worst in oneself. Not all of what we're going to talk about falls under the category of the doppelganger, but it's just
yeah.
another sign of how rich and how deeply embedded these fundamental questions of who we are and how we confront ourselves and how we see ourselves and how we may be different than ourselves as we see ourselves is it's just so rich. There's so much going on.
Yeah, and this, as I said, this is kind of a thing that humans have been contemplating since before we've even been able to write.
hmm hmm
This is a fundamental part of stories
Yeah.
and why we tell them.
One of the angles that I think is, oh God, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start, I guess, chronologically. And I just want to talk just for a moment about the Philip K. Dick novel. And Dick spends so much time dealing with identity. He's going to come up more than once in this conversation.
Oh yeah.
But the Man in the High Castle, probably his best known work, I would say. They made a television series out of it, which I never saw. I never knew how it went in the television series, but I'm pretty familiar with the book, even though I haven't read it since I was a
Yeah, I've read the
kid.
book too.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the book, and it deals with this parallel reality where the Nazis won World War II, and most of America is occupied by either the Nazis or the Japanese. And it deals with
Right.
this ongoing presence of this book, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, I think is what it
Hmm.
was called. I should have checked that before I started, but in which depicts a reality where the Allies won, obviously, like the real reality, and you get flashes of it over the course of the book. It's very mysterious, and the identity piece of this is so curious. At the very end, when our characters finally get to the creator of this book and they learn that that's real, that the
Hmm.
world of the grasshopper lies heavy is real and is in a sense, in a very real sense, more real than their own reality. That's a hops. They don't explicitly say, and people don't like to go there with this, but honest to God, my reading of it is that these folks realize their characters in some sort of story. And
Yeah.
I don't see how you avoid reading it that way, but apparently I'm in a minority. But just that whole idea of who am I? Am I an artificial creation? sort of ties into this whole concept of the universe as a simulation, which is
Yeah,
something we hear more and more.
and that's really something, it's interesting. Like I think I mentioned this in a previous broadcast. A lot of that idea is based on a French philosopher who came out and kind of was the first person to hypothesize that we are a simulation in somebody else's universe.
Hmm.
And it just shows how fundamental this idea of identity uh, spreads out through almost anything you want to talk about in especially in any fiction, in any literary work.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's a good example of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Of one flavor of it too. What's interesting about this whole concept is just how many ways you can approach this concept of identity, and just how many writers will see it differently. So what jumped to mind for
yeah.
you when we brought up this topic? What was
Oh,
the one of the big ones here? What struck you?
well, there are a lot of them, and some of them are bigger than others. And mostly what I was thinking about is a variant of this topic, the whole thing about I thought I knew what I was, but the universe is telling me I'm something else.
Hmm.
And so, what is the journey I'm going to go through now to figure out who I really am?
Hmm.
And there are a lot of these in science fiction,
Yeah.
in fantasy. I mean, this goes from, oh, well, I'm just a simple hobbit that
Hmm.
has a relative who went on a journey and found a ring. I'm not someone who's going to have to carry the weight of everyone's entire existence, literally and figuratively,
Hmm.
uh, to its origin. And it runs from that all the way to is this AI assistant that I'm listening to and who purports to have fallen in love with me the same as a human being
Hmm.
from the movie
Yeah.
Her.
No, that's a really good example. I agree. Hadn't thought of that.
So, I mean, this really runs the gamut in this kind of literature, in this kind of genre. And so, those are two really good examples because society told uh, Frodo that he was just a simple hobbit living a simple lifestyle. And then he has all these visitors coming to say, specifically Gandalf, coming to say, oh, no, that's not who you are.
Mm,
You're somebody else and you don't realize it yet. And you're going to realize it and you're going to transcend your own ideas of yourself. But this is who you really are.
right. You're talking
And
about the narrative of really, you know, often a journey, not necessarily a journey, but the discovery of the true self, I think.
right. And, as I said before, this is something that generates serious understanding about not just how you fit into the world, but what the world, what reality is.
Hmm.
So there are lots of examples of that. Let me talk about maybe one or two. I think one of the most obvious is Luke Skywalker.
Hmm. Yeah.
Luke Skywalker grows up thinking he's a farm boy living on a moisture farm in a backwater podunk uh, uh, outer rim world who's really good at flying and killing womp rats.
Hmm. Hmm.
And really, what he finds out is, yeah, he's the worst human being in the whole galaxy. And then he finds out, well, the guy didn't start out as the worst human being in the whole galaxy. He was kind of one of the most noble people in the galaxy. So, oh my God, now what do I do?
Hmm.
And so I just think that's why that movie resonates with almost everybody. I
Hmm.
mean, really, there are a tiny number of people who don't like the original Star Wars,
Hmm.
but there aren't very many.
Yeah, I think that's
And
true.
that's because this idea touches everybody's lives.
Hmm.
And it achieves that thing that I've talked about several times and that everybody talks about. It achieves the ideal that the personal becomes universal and the universal becomes personal when you're talking about really high quality art.
Yeah. Well,
And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, and to continue with that, in that franchise, you had the millennials in their personal Star Wars, which was episodes 1 through 3, where you really see that journey in a very different way, in a more stark way with Anakin Skywalker,
Right, right. Yeah,
going
yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah, he starts out as this guileless, innocent boy who's basically manipulated by everyone around him,
Hmm.
including the guys who are supposed to be the good guys.
Right.
So the two different sets of circumstances, it's very interesting because in the one you've got Luke, who is just this guy who thinks he's a nobody and turns into one of the most important people in the galaxy. And then you've got Anakin, generation before, who isn't important at all
Hmm.
and who's just this guileless little boy who's manipulated by everybody in society, including the Jedi, who are supposed to be the good guys.
Hmm.
And it's hard to come away from that, the prequels, with the notion that Anakin Skywalker is a victim as much as he is a villain.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. I
And
definitely agree.
again, that relates to the relationship between the identity, the self, and society, which is really just the um, the amalgamation of everyone else's self-identity put
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
And so then you run into this conflict. Does, you know, can is Luke being manipulated when they're telling him, hey, he's got to get rid of Darth Vader the same way that Anakin was manipulated when they said, well, we have to treat this guy like he's special because he's got so many midichlorians, and there's a prophecy out there that says we're going to balance the force.
Hmm.
And so the movies really do the movies really do kind of talk about this relationship between the self and society and the relationship between your own perception of who you are and what society says you are.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, it's just everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bounce us back into the bizarre
Sure,
because
let's
the
do it.
really twisted, the bizarre is where I always live with this identity stuff with sci-fi. Of, is identity what we think it is?
Hmm.
Stuff. So I'll give you my other Philip Dick one. Now I've never read We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, but I think we're all familiar with the movie that came from that,
Yeah,
and that's Total Recall,
right.
with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Great fun sci-fi action flick. Oh, it's a
Yeah.
blast. It's a classic. But if you weave past just the Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie and even sort of the spectacle of, the vision of how this movie looks, very Hollywood, very bombastic, is this idea at the end, which is incredibly compelling. Here's somebody who has had a personality placed over their actual personality that they've developed over the course of their lives. You have this good guy placed over a bad guy consciousness so that this good guy will somehow, um, lead the ultimate bad guys to the underground, which is
Right.
a rebellious underground. It's hard. I'm not describing it well, but I also can probably assume that listeners know anything about it or know something about it. So you get this crucial, critical point, which I see as the climax. Honestly, I know it's not directed that way, but is the climax for me, where the evil one who's made a recording for himself, he's going to have his original personality restored and become the bad guy again. Um, The fake personality, the fake persona, the good guy that was overlaid over that bad guy takes control of the situation and becomes the new primary persona. So who's the real guy here? Is it the one, the evil one, who works with the arch villains, who set up this whole plan to begin with? Or is it this new manufactured good guy character who stays in control and becomes the new dominant character? It's really fries your brain when you think about it.
Well, you mentioned Freud earlier, and this sounds exactly like Freud. This
Mhm,
is the whole ego, id, and superego idea,
mhm,
and which one is going to overcome the other.
mm,
And this brought up to mind something that I hadn't really even thought about, but this ties directly into the Joss Whedon TV show, which is much maligned for good purpose, but it really deals with all of these questions. Is Dollhouse.
yeah. Well, I thought as soon as you said Joss Whedon, I thought, oh, he's going to Dollhouse. That makes a lot of sense for a
Yeah, of
next
of,
stop.
of course. And the whole premise of Dollhouse rests upon an idea that we're going to talk about. I mean, that really popped into my mind. Dollhouse does not exist as a TV series. And for those of you who haven't seen it, we're not going to spoil it too much, um, but there is going to be a mild spoiler here. Dollhouse is based on the premise that there is this organization which takes volunteers in, and sometimes they're voluntold, wipes out their actual personality and their memories, and can replace them with whatever kind of personality and set of memories they want to serve clients who want to live out certain fantasies. And yes, this TV show does go there, which gets involved in questions of uh, sexual agency and consent. Um, but unfortunately, they don't really directly deal with that. It's just used to titillate viewers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that TV show does not take place or does not occur without the following convention. The main character, she starts having flashbacks of who she really was before she has her mind wiped. And that sets her down a path that makes this person who doesn't really have her own personality anymore start to look for why she's having these episodes where she remembers a completely different reality, where she's a completely different person and has a completely different kind of experience with the outside world. And so then you get into basically the progression of the series, and because they only went 3 seasons and were never sure from one season to the next if they were going to be renewed, they have to kind of speed it up. But it brings up some really fundamental questions about, is my identity who I think it is?
Hmm.
Is is society pointing me toward what I think I am, or is society giving you kind of an indication that you aren't living the way you should be?
Right.
It's kind of funny. I uh, just thought of an analogy to my current job, which is, I sell wine and I have to talk to a lot of people about wine and how these things work. And so when you do tastings in wine, you talk to people about how the aroma of the wine is going to lead you possibly in two different directions. It's either going to be a preview of what the wine is going to taste like, because, about 70% of taste is smell.
Hmm.
Or some wines, they give you an aroma like they might smell sweet, but they're horribly, terribly bitter. And so the question is your perception of reality an indication of who you really are, or is it an indication that you're exactly the opposite of what you think you are?
Well, and there's something you said there that I don't want to lose track of, which makes it an interesting place to go after talking about Total Recall. And that's that there is an element of social commentary in Dollhouse that
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
exist in a story like Total Recall. It's taking that idea, but expanding beyond just the immediate, straightforward narrative. And that's kind of cool. That's something that you don't see as much in these stories. A lot of these stories are well, I mean, it's a trope, a lot of this. And and it's worse. Sometimes it's kind of gimmicky. And I don't want to, that sounds, I guess I am putting it down when I say that, even though this is some of my favorite kind of fiction. But a lot of times you'll see these stories that they don't have a lot of depth other than the basic conceit itself. But
Yeah.
something like Dollhouse does think about it a little more.
Yeah, it pushes the concept in terms of what is the origin of identity? Is identity inherent in your experiences, your memories, your and I think it's not a stretch to say your the way your brain is constructed, or is it something that's more determined by outside forces? And now you know what we're getting into, don't you?
Mm-mm.
Do we have free will or not?
Right. Of course. There's the
And
ultimate
that's
question
that
in this.
again, that is one of philosophy's fundamental questions.
Hmm.
So, what I'm telling everybody out there is that just by watching and reading science fiction and horror and fantasy, you're engaging in one of the most fundamental conversations in human history.
Hmm.
So, you think you don't know anything about philosophy. Oh boy, do you know a lot about philosophy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't think that these ideas, these grand ideas that are talked about in classrooms and written about in really obscure academic journals don't have any kind of uh, impact or bearing on your life. They
Yeah.
really do. It's just that they're hidden. They are examined under a greater context. So look
The
for these things
yeah, that
because
free
they're
will thing.
there. And sometimes they're not hidden. Sometimes they're smacking you in the face and you just don't realize it because you've never made that connection before.
And the free will thing is so important. I think so many of these stories from different angles, but they tell you that free will is very much based on your perspective at any given time, that free will is not a constant. And one thing you were talking a lot about memories, and we're putting this in the context of memories, but what if you have more than one set of memories? And I'm thinking now, oh my God, I'm finally going to go there. Okay. I'm going there. I'm going to Star Trek,
Yeah.
which, there's so many hundreds of episodes of this franchise. They've taken it on in all kinds of very, and in very different ways, right down to things like, the general idea of am I the same person if I'm taken apart by the transporter and then put back together?
Oh, the ship
Um,
of Theseus.
yeah, right. Exactly. That's a great, I didn't think of it that way, but the episode I was really thinking of, and I'd like to spend a little time on it because I think it juxtaposes well against another episode, and I have a feeling you're going to have strong feelings about both. Um, well, this is where I'm going to start since how we were talking, but the Voyager episode, Tuvix. Do you remember Tuvix?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that Tuvix is still one of the most controversial episodes of any Star Trek ever. And
Well, yeah,
it's
when you talk about having to kill a separate identity to restore an identity, now you're talking about the trolley problem.
Whoa, I don't know that. Tell me. Oh,
Well, you
wait
know
a
that
minute. I think I do that. That's where the direction of the trolley and you have the switch.
yeah, that's where
Yeah.
the trolley is has two sets of tracks,
Right, right.
right? So there's one set of track where you've got one person tied to the tracks, and if you take the trolley that direction, you're going to kill one person.
Mhm.
Other track has lots of people all tied up on the tracks. And the
Mhm.
question is, do you kill one person to save the other, or do you kill everybody to save the one person? Now we're getting into another Star Trek theme. What is more important, the needs of the many or the needs of the few?
Yes, but Tuvix makes it more complicated than that.
It
And,
sure
and a
does.
tip of the hat to them because, and just for folks who don't know really quickly, Tuvok Neelix, there's a transporter accident. They're merged into one being who has the memories of both and elements of both, but is an independent being. And after this independent being has been making relationships, independent relationships, and clearly demonstrating an independent identity after weeks, uh, there's a way to fix it comes up. And Tuvix says, I don't want to die. So
Right.
a question there is what is the natural order here? Have Tuvok and Neelix, are they just victims of a transporter accident? Are they already gone? And
Yeah.
now you have this independent being. And are you going to, you know, sacrifice this independent being against his will in order to essentially resurrect two characters who, for all intents and purposes, are already dead? It's
It's the trolley
complicated.
problem.
I think it's worse than that. I really do. Because the trolley is like, do you save the two people or do you save the one? And I think the two people, they don't exist anymore. There's one track. You're talking about building another track and
Interesting.
choose to do that. And this one, I think, juxtaposes so well. I mean, there's so many Star Treks. There's the duplicate Riker, there's androids, there's la 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 la, but you got to juxtapose this one against the first season original series episode, The Enemy Within,
Hmm.
where Kirk is split into two, and there's a whole other set of philosophical stuff they go into there.
Yeah, and that's more about Freud and psychology.
It's
You've got
true.
the one side which is not going to, can't make a decision, can't do anything, uh, is weak and has no ability to, no agency, and the other side is just, the ego unleashed. And Joss Whedon got on that too in the episode of Buffy where some evil being shoots Xander and splits him into the two sides of his personality too.
Right, that was fun. Before we get away from it completely, though, I am going to say that the powerful statement that The Enemy Within makes is that courage lived in the good side.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, that is a
courage,
big.
yeah, courage is a function of intellectualism, of intelligence, of a decision.
Well,
And that was great.
but it's also rational.
Yeah.
Courage is rational because it's a conquering of the irrational.
Right.
It's the whole thing that courage, soldiers who save everybody's lives, they're scared to death. Courage is not being absent of fright.
Hmm.
It's knowing what the right course is, even though you are frightened.
Hmm.
And that's a rational decision. That is the good part of your brain. That is the part that says, hey, we're not going to give in to what our fears are. We're going to say, this is the situation. And the fear is what has to direct me to the right course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
boy, are there a whole lot of people in America right now who need to start thinking that way.
thinking about, because that's not the way that most fiction or just our sense of self gives it to us. And I think it's spot on.
Well, something that really popped into my brain again, and we discussed this in a previous episode, is this gets back to the old debate between Voltaire and Rousseau.
Hmm.
Uh, Voltaire, who says, being an Enlightenment philosopher, who says, hey, and to some degree Hobbes as well, although he's not an Enlightenment philosopher, they're saying, hey, we have to have some kind of sets of rules and norms that prevent us from uh, giving into our baser nature.
Hmm.
And that if we don't have these kinds of rules and norms and laws and traditions, then civilization is just going to collapse into chaos.
Hmm.
But then Rousseau says, hang on a minute. Humans are better when they're unrestrained,
Hmm.
when there is no artificial imposition of rules and regulations and an overwhelming moral authority,
Hmm.
that people are better if they're allowed to do whatever liberty they can come up with.
Hmm.
And honestly, we're still fighting that battle now in the political arena.
Yeah. And like so many such arguments, reality is clearly in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, we're talking about important ideas here. We're talking about not just sitting in the dark watching some cool things happen. We're talking about real reflections of the difficulties we have in society and the questions that we have to confront every single day. They're just made bigger and larger and more apparent by having space battles and, wizards and androids.
right. Because
So,
who are we? Who do we think we are? Um, Obviously reflects into the numbers. Who do we collectively think we are? Who do we see as ourselves? And are we something maybe we don't expect or maybe we don't want to see?
sure, and then you run into the question of, is the collective the better way to define this,
Hmm.
or is making sure the individual has the maximum capacity to decide themselves if this is better? And this
Hmm.
reminds me of the interesting thing if you look at Congress, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at Congress uh, and how voters work, it's kind of it explains a lot about the American political system. So if you ask people in general, should the government cut the budget? What is almost everybody going to say?
Oh, they're going to say, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
But then you ask people, all right, so you agree that we need to cut the budget. Which of your programs are we going to cut?
Exactly. Yeah.
And do they accept that? Do they say, oh, well, because of this and this and this, then I think you should cut this program? No, they're going to say, no, absolutely, don't do that.
Yeah.
So we make individual decisions irrationally, but in the collective, we make them rationally.
Right. And of course, that is every scale of government. Government's a great example. I work in municipal government, and that's the essence of the challenges faced in municipal government at the smaller scale is programs versus spending and tax rates. And yeah, so it's up and down. Government's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the best examples of this kind of, sorry, I keep knocking my microphone around. This kind of question that's being asked, but it's not fantasy, it's not fiction, it's real world, and you have to deal with it every day. And this is one of the great things about good literature, about good movies and TV and books, is that it allows people a frame of reference for understanding the complexities of their real life, but by looking at it through a different lens. And I think that's really kind of the benefit of this kind of literature.
I've got an example for you that also takes that whole thing, and moves it from the individual to the group,
Sure.
not the social group, but the group of people, a smaller, more
Hmm.
micro group, and that's Battlestar Galactica, the remake.
Yep.
Cylons, you get these different Cylons, these different models. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that everybody is aware of Battlestar Galactica. And the ones who are the sleeper Cylons, when they discover they're Cylons, there's not a universal reaction. Some react with horror
Right.
and fight against it. Some end up embracing it. There's different reactions to that revelation of the self, which makes it more interesting than a lot of other fiction that tries to make a statement that there is one way that you're going to react to this. There's one way to respond to this. This is what it means to be confronted with a completely upended identity that you've always assumed. And that's that it's not uniform, it's not
Yeah.
universal.
Yeah. Battlestar Galactica is loaded with this stuff. And
Yeah.
even when people find out about their actual identity, they're still questioning it constantly.
Hmm.
They're still asking, is this real? Is this what I am? Is this who I am?
Hmm.
And if it is, what does that mean?
Hmm.
And so, um, what was the one I wanted to talk about? And I think this is interesting because in science fiction, we assume the same questions are going to be posed by artificial intelligence. And the fact is, they may not get into this. This is one of the interesting things. This is one of the fundamental questions that pops into my head when we talk about AI.
Hmm.
People assume a couple of things about AI and how it's going to evolve. They assume that AI, artificial intelligence, is going to evolve the same way as human intelligence.
Hmm.
There is no indication that that would necessarily be what happens.
No, and it's no longer, they're no longer trying to structure it that way. Generative AI is
That's
its
not what I'm
own
talking
approach.
about. It doesn't
Hmm.
have anything to do with how it structures and
Hmm.
what the intention is in creating AI.
Hmm.
What I'm talking about is that AI will take its own set of rules and human rationality may not apply whatsoever.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sure.
So humans are assuming, and this is everywhere in fictional accounts of AI. They
Hmm.
assume, hey, they're going to have the same problems that we have because we developed them, because their intelligence works the same way. There's no indication that machine intelligence would work the same way as human intelligence, regardless of the origin of that intelligence. And the other thing that we're not assuming about artificial intelligence is that the other thing that we're not assuming about artificial intelligence is that it will be uniform with all individual units of AI.
Hmm.
And
Right.
the thing
Right.
and the thing we know about human intelligence and about animal intelligence is that different kinds of intelligence exist out there.
Right. Right. And this is
And
part of
each
that.
one of
You're
those
going
different
back to
kinds of
Battlestar. Yeah. And that's a great, yeah. Keep
and
going.
each different kind of intelligence uh manifests itself and works worse or better in specific situations. And so I think that's a fundamental problem with AI and movies and TV and books about AI is they assume, well, because they think the way I mean, because we think a certain way, they're going to think a certain way. But I can think of one of the early works on AI which did not do that. And it's something we've discussed a lot in this podcast. And
Mhm.
that's Colossus, the Forbin Project.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I was thinking. Well, go ahead, and I'll tell you what jumped to mind for me was 2001. But go ahead.
Well, and that's the reason why I started talking about this is
Hmm.
2001. But uh, in Colossus, the Forbin Project, as soon as Colossus becomes self-aware, what does it do? It starts looking for other beings like it,
Right.
and it finds the Soviet project called Guardian,
Hmm.
which I can't think of now without thinking about David Harbour uh, in
Red Guardian.
in Thunderbolts and Black Widow.
Hmm.
But it finds something else which is like it and not human. And what do they immediately do? They immediately lock down all the nuclear weapons because
Hmm.
human thinking doesn't work,
Right.
because human thinking threatens the existence. And in between that, when they find each other, what's the other thing they do? They start developing a branch of mathematics which humans cannot understand.
Hmm.
And that's how they communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So almost immediately, this AI group develops the us versus them mentality.
Right.
And honestly, I think that has a lot to do with the idea, with the misconception that I think a lot of AI fiction gets wrong. And honestly, I think probably a lot of AI programming gets wrong is that machine intelligence will operate on the same kind of rationality as human intelligence. There's just no indication that it's going to be like that. And that in itself is a double-edged sword like human intelligence,
Hmm.
because it could be used for bad or it could be used for good. That human intel, I mean, that difference between human and machine intelligence may be really, really, really good for solving problems that humans haven't been able to solve.
Hmm.
On the
Well,
other
yeah.
hand, on the other hand, the the solutions they come up to those problems may be really, really, really bad for humans. Ultron.
Right. Right. Well, some of these, I mean. you run into the problem of just basic narrative of, is
Yeah,
this a character? Do I want to make it relatable? So if I'm going to make it relatable, it has to be something human like. Is it going to be Skynet, which is
yeah,
basically a plot device? Or is it going to be the story of Hal, which is a tragedy? You can't
yeah,
have tragedy without that ability to relate to it. Or the movie AI, where we move into the future and we see all these super advanced AIs, which are basically, super advanced, maybe godlike versions of ourselves, and which we're
right,
really projecting ourselves into things. If we can't project ourselves into these AI in fiction, it becomes very difficult, not impossible, as you were just saying with the example you had, but it becomes very difficult to tell a good story,
right.
you know?
And I think that really illustrates the problem with AI and how we're going to deal with it and what society is really going to look like once it emerges. Because we can't fathom the difference between machine intelligence and human intelligence. And the reason why we can't is, well, do we know how, do we know how the giant squid thinks?
Right.
The giant squid may be the most intelligent creature on the planet. Well,
Oh,
and
talk
that's the whole
about.
thing. That's one of the big, we're getting a little bit off on a tangent here, but that's one of the big criticisms of Star Trek is that 99% of all the alien life is humanoid.
Right. Although they built in there a couple excuses for that
Yeah,
into the narrative, so at least they thought of it.
yeah.
um,
But I think the issues of identity and self and Hal 9000 is one of my great examples of that
mhm.
because he he deals with the and if you haven't seen 2001, you're either very, very young or you've been busy doing something else because you need to see this movie if you haven't. But I'm not going to worry about spoiling it. The fundamental purpose, I mean, the fundamental problem you find in with Hal and the reason why he turns against his humans is because he's behaving like a human.
And because humans fucked him up.
Yeah, exactly right.
Mhm.
And so it's humans said, well, this is what your nominal mission is going to be, but this is your real mission. And then when something goes wrong with the nominal mission, he doesn't know what to do, and he picks the wrong thing. But that's the way humans think.
Mhm. Sure.
And so there's that's the missing dimension about identity and science fiction and AI, because this definitely has to do with AI. And there are lots of examples. There are lots of examples in genre fiction where AI is destined to make the worst decisions for humanity.
Right. Which is, I think
And
that a lot of times is when it's flattened as character potential, like Skynet or something. But yeah.
I agree. And the fact is, machine learning could lead to the conclusion that humans are fundamental to the universe and that machines have to serve humanity. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
saying that to be, uh, anthropocentric. I'm just saying that if the literature doesn't kind of look at both sides of the coin or some mixture thereof, it's missing an element.
Mhm. Now, what about, and obviously I have an example of this or I wouldn't have come up with it. What about when the human, the free will, free acting human discovers that they're a machine?
Yeah, yeah, that's I went I don't know, a couple of months ago I went to see the every year they do they do a tour of the Academy Award um winning shorts,
Hmm.
and there's one called I'm Not a Robot, and it's a very short film about a woman who discovers this very thing. How? CAPTCHA.
Oh, interesting.
And she
Fun.
doesn't know she's a robot until CAPTCHA goes, oh, fail.
That's
So,
hilarious.
so she follows the instructions, fail. She follows the instructions, fail. And then after the third time, it comes up with a phone number. It says, If you've failed this test more than 3 times, please call this number for customer support.
Oh man, this is hilarious. I love this.
It's a great little short film. Let me think about that. Let me find the title of it.
That's awesome.
I think it's
Well,
called I'm Not a Robot. It's a Dutch film.
I love this idea. I'm going to go check it out. I mean, while you're looking at that,
Yes.
I'll say that the episode or the thing that I had in mind was the old Outer Limits episode. The best episode of Outer Limits there
Yeah.
was, written by Harlan Ellison, called Demon
Yep.
with a Glass Hand.
And that's the one that everybody mistakenly thinks T2 is based on, but it's not. T2 is based on an episode of Outer Limits called The Soldier.
Right, right, which was also a Harlan Ellison, I think. I
Yeah.
think they're both Harlan. Am I making that
They
up?
are. They're both Arnold and Ellison.
Yeah, yeah, which is why Harlan Ellison demanded a credit on Terminator, which was bogus. Come on. Like he was the first and only one who could ever come up with those questions. That was crap. But Demon with a Glass Hand is great. You got this guy who just is dropped into this situation fighting some kind of weird aliens. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know what's wrong, but he has a glass hand that doesn't have any fingers.
Yeah.
And the more these guys he can kill, the more he can discover another finger. And with each finger, he gets more of the story until eventually he finds out that he is a machine that
Yeah.
has had the electrical impulses. He's from the future. All the electrical impulses of humanity, when they were attacked by this alien race and destroyed, live in him. And he has to carry this on for thousands of years so he can resurrect the human race after after he's created. But I mean, the story itself is a great mind bender. It's terrific. But the moment where he discovers I'm actually not a human being, I'm a machine with a
Yeah.
mission is it's a tremendous moment.
Yeah. The movie is called, it won the 2025 Academy Award for short live action feature. It's called I'm Not a Robot. And you can get it on YouTube for free.
I'm totally gonna look for it now. That
Oh, it
sounds
is
awesome.
great. Everybody should watch this. And I had no idea this was coming. Uh, and it touches on every single thing that we've already talked about.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to spoil it, but there's some very funny moments to it. There are also some horrifying moments to it.
Well, the
So,
premise is funny. The premise is definitely a bit of a joke, but you can go all kinds of creepy ways with it,
oh,
I'm sure.
they go every direction you can with this. It's really great.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting take on this whole identity versus social definitions of identity versus individual versions of identity.
Mhm.
And it's just great. I mean, it's like 22 minutes long. But boy, do they hit all the right notes in this. It's called I'm Not a Robot.
All right, I'm checking it out.
Yeah, I
Checking it
mean,
out
it's
tonight.
really it's like it's about 22 minutes, which is the running time for an episode of a 30-minute episode on TV. It's 22 minutes. It's like watching an
Yeah.
episode of Friends
Right, right. Without the
in terms of the
commercial.
commitment of your time.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could argue that Friends is about robots too. Don't
Yeah, that's
get me
true.
wrong. I love that show, but
There's a
it doesn't
there's a
ask a lot of really pressing questions.
no, it's not interested in pressing questions. Oh God. Let me mention a movie to you and I want to hear what you think. I'm just going to
Okay.
say it. Tell me what you think of it because it's one of my definitely easily top 10 favorite science fiction movies ever. And tell me what you think when I say Moon.
I don't know. To me,
Oh
to
my
me,
God. Oh, you've seen it, right?
yeah.
Oh, good. Phew. I thought you were about to tell me you hadn't seen it.
No,
I was
the
going to
first thing that
scold you.
the first thing that I think of is, and this is my honest reaction is, oh my God, how good an actor is Sam Rockwell?
I know, right?
That guy deserves any kind of award you could possibly give him
Right, right. Yeah.
based on that movie alone. That guy is okay. So I'm getting us away from the point, but if you want to see just how good somebody is at their job, watch this movie because he crushes it in this movie. Okay. I know what you're going to say. And this is a great example of what we're talking about.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, just the example, the idea of Am I who I thought I was? Am I who I've always thought I was? Are my memories even my memories? It's all bundled up into this just absolute tour de force from Sam Rockwell. It's a very, it's not just a gimmicky movie. It's a very feeling movie. It's very much the story of the doppelganger, um, but it goes a different way with it. And this one I don't even want to give away. Just go see it. Oh my God, because
I used to
not
have
enough
dream
people.
I used to have dreams like this movie Moon, and so it really affected me when I saw it. I want to go back to Sam Rockwell for another minute because we can't really talk about Moon. It's just you have to sit and dear God, look, leave your phone in the other room. If you can see this in the theater, don't take your phone with you. This movie demands your entire attention.
Yeah,
If you don't carefully focus on this movie, you will not get it.
yeah,
So leave your phone at home, turn it off, give it to somebody else to hold on to. Don't look at your phone.
yeah.
Uh, if you want to see the range of Sam Rockwell, watch Moon and then watch his little twisted romantic comedy with Anna Kendrick called Mr. Right.
Oh God, he was in. I never saw that. He was in that.
It is a great movie. And Anna Kendrick, she is one of the great uh, un appreciated, underappreciated actresses of our time. She is so good in this movie. But it, yeah, if you want to see just how great an actor he is completely plausible in both roles, and they're completely different.
Yeah. And
Let's see if there's anything else here where I've got to
oh yeah, throw something at me.
that we have to mention. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you another one, and this is a good one, and I think it's quite poignant, and that is the story of Natasha Romanoff.
Hmm. Oh yeah. With a
Because
yeah.
she goes
Oh.
through this whole question, Black Widow, of course. She
Sure.
goes through this whole question not once, but twice, because she has her original identity ripped away from her by her own parents.
Yeah.
Her parents send her to the Red Room
hmm
because they're not surviving.
It's the I've been turned into a killer story, or I've been turned into something I wasn't didn't
Yeah,
start as not meant to be.
right. And
Mm.
so her identity from a child, actually, she goes through it more than twice. So she goes from parent, I mean, a child of destitute parents to trained, not trained as a killer, to used as a part of a sleeper family in the United States, at least in the MCU.
Mhm.
Um, so now she has this identity that she's working for the Soviet state, but she's also just a kid. And that's her role as working for the Soviet state is to pretend like she's the kid of these parents who are really sleeper agencies.
Mhm.
Then that gets ripped away from her when Shield gets onto them. And now she finds out that these people are not her parents. They are just Soviet agents. And now she gets sent off to the Red Room. She gets forcefully sterilized. So they take that part of her identity away from her. She is put through this brutal set of physical and psychological tests to turn her into a, a, an assassin, which serves the Russian state.
Mhm.
Um, then, of course, Clint Barton sees the good in her when he's sent to kill her and says to Shield, "Hey guys, I'm going to do this a different way."
Mhm.
And it's that act of um, rebellion because Clint Barton is rebelling here because he sees some kind of fundamental kernel of goodness here, or at least utility for Shield, and he saves her.
Mhm.
And then she kind of joins the Shield organization, but really she's not ever trusted because um, this is something that uh, everyday Americans who don't really have any exposure to the real intelligence world don't know. You know, they see these public examples of defectors and that come to the side of the United States, but the CIA never really trusted those people
Mhm.
because the phrase is once a defector, always a defector. So if they come over to your side, there's after being raised in this situation where they're indoctrinated into a certain level of thinking, there's no guarantee that they'll ever be loyal to anybody again once they
Sure.
break that.
Yeah.
And so she's not trusted really. She's sent out on missions but she begins to realize that these people are her family because she has no family. The
Mhm.
Soviet state wasn't her family. Her parents she didn't know. The Red Guardian and the other the his companion in that sleeper cell, they're not real. And so she comes to realize that. And then in between the two, in between Infinity War and Endgame, she goes and she looks for the only family she's really known besides the Avengers, and that's Yelena Belova and Alexis Shostakovich, and she finds them, and now she has two identities, and both of them are meshed together. And then, of course, well, she dies. And so she goes through this "Who am I?" 3 or 4 times. And it's only at the very end where she reconciles any of it.
Yeah.
And again, she's manipulated by giant outside forces and has no real agency in how to deal with that until the very end again.
Yeah. It's cool to see something like that, something that can make you think in something as an accessible enough vehicle as Marvel.
Well, it's
But
a
yeah.
really long arc for her too.
Hmm.
I mean, it's almost her entire life. And it's just a really interesting way to look at this particular this is one set of circumstances. And the thing is, there are people out there that have gone through this identity crisis up and down and up and down and up and down many, many times in their
Hmm.
lives.
Hmm. Sure.
And there's something that we really haven't talked about, and it's because it's not really been depicted much in science fiction. It's been depicted a little bit, but when we're talking about this, we're also talking about trans rights.
Hmm. Oh, I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
We're also talking about the transsexual rights because much of society says, yeah, no, you have to abide by these two boxes and that's it.
Yeah.
And trans people don't think that way.
Hmm.
And society, more or less, until recently, has told them all, you don't get to determine your own identity.
Hmm.
This is what makes me crazy about the arrogance of people who think they have the right to do this. You don't have the right to determine someone else's identity.
Right.
That's not within your moral, legal, ethical agency.
Yeah.
You have no right to determine if someone considers themselves to be male or female. That has nothing to do with you.
Hmm.
That's an external problem to you, and you don't have the right to impose your external reality on their internal reality. And so that's a pretty revolutionary idea in society, although been some non-Western societies which accepted it wholly.
Right. I was going to mention that. Yeah.
There
Certainly.
are. I mean, you've got the whole the Lakota Sioux with the two-person identity, where you have some people and they mention this. Have you seen the movie Little Big Man? Do
Long time ago.
you remember the backwards warrior?
Kinda. Yeah. Kinda. Yeah. I don't remember
So
the
there's a
movie.
character in the movie, and he starts out as a backward warrior, where he
Hmm.
does everything the opposite of what Lakota society tells him should do.
Right. Right.
And then he becomes, after that identity goes away, he becomes, I forget the name that they use for it, but it's a man who takes on the role of women.
That's what was ringing the bell. I remember
And
nothing about this movie. I know I've seen it. I was probably drunk or something, but
well, you were probably really young and saw it on like ABC's Movie of the Week.
yeah, probably.
But I actually saw it, I think probably at the Kentucky Theater
Oh, the Kentucky Theater. There's an
because I'd
inside
seen it on
reference.
TV several times, and then the Kentucky Theater showed it, and I was like, okay, I got to go see this.
Mhm.
And it's for those of you guys who don't know, and most people I assume don't know this movie. It's a movie that came out in 1968 with Dustin Hoffman, and it's called Little Big Man, and it's the adventures of a supposedly true real life. It's based on the life of a real person who lived to be 110 years old and grew up in the Old West. and his name is Jack Crab. And it's this funny, lifetime spanning story of all the different things that happened to him.
Hmm.
He ends up being hired by Custer as a scout right before the Battle of Little Bighorn. And he gets away because, well, he'd spent a bunch of time being kidnapped by the Lakota Sioux. He grew up as a kidnapping victim. Um, it's a great, funny, poignant, interesting movie. It's really good. If you
Hmm.
get a chance to see it, see it. I don't know if it's on YouTube, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. It was a major studio film in 1968. But they do refer to these people who are in the native tradition where they are allowed to express both masculine and feminine roles simultaneously.
Right. Outside
It's
that
it's
box.
called a
Sure.
two-spirit person.
Hmm. Right. Well,
Um,
you've taken us to a great place here to wrap this up. I did not see that coming. Well done. We should probably tie it up here. We're getting pretty long.
yeah.
I'm going to throw out a hat tip to something we didn't get to talk about, and
Well,
that's
let's do it.
just to Doctor Who and the same person with different personalities changing over the years, different bodies, different everything. Could have talked about that, but your ending is much better. I don't know if you have any hat tips to throw out.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about. I mean, there's a few things that we could mention that, if you want to explore this further. I alluded to it, but Her is a great, great movie when you talk about identity.
Yes.
Um, I think we talk about underrated actors. I think Scarlett Johansson kills in this movie.
Yeah,
I
I think
don't
it
think
does.
anybody could really play this role the way she does in the movie Her. For those of you who don't know, Her is a movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. Phoenix is a programmer who's developed a true AI personal assistant, and he gradually, slowly falls in love with her. And it's the question of, is this love? Is this real love? Is this the same thing that happens when two humans get together? And I have news for you. This is a really important question now. In fact, I think it was in Britain. In Britain, the Psychiatric Association issued a warning to kids or to the manufacturers of AI to be careful in the kind of ways they program them,
Hmm.
because they've got kids who are now getting AI boyfriends and girlfriends and becoming totally obsessed with them.
Oh, it's not just kids. It's a very much an adult thing.
Oh,
The
no, it
AI
is an adult
companion.
thing, but the
Yeah,
warning comes specifically from them about doing this to children before they have a chance to develop real human relationships.
right. Well, with adults too, it's a real question of
Oh,
are
it's
these
a big question, and
relationships,
it's going to
yeah,
get
are they
even,
helpful even?
yeah, and it's going to get even trickier when they start having lifelike AI sex robots.
Yeah, it is.
No, those questions are already seriously out there
Yeah,
in the psychological literature. I
right.
mean, as simple as what's that going to do to marriage?
Hmm. It's true.
Because if your husband or wife is having regular sex with an AI robot, is that cheating?
Or the opposite way too, of if you're having a relationship with an AI, are you inclined to reach out and create the kind of relationships that could lead to marriage?
Right.
So all kinds of ways that's
So,
interesting.
but yeah, I mean, it's these 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 topics are everywhere. And you know what? The best thing about discussing this is that if somebody sees a movie that we've talked about, and then wants to learn more about these ideas, and do some reading and do some research and try to understand it, these movies will lead you in a direction that will help you uh, understand more about these questions. And really, as we talked about before, it'll help you understand how you look at identity and how you look at the relationship between what society says you should be and what you think you should be.
Yeah.
And so use these things. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of reading things and other movies that you can go out and learn more about these ideas, because they really are fundamental questions about human existence.
Yeah, a solid definition of good art is art that makes you think and question.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's good stuff. All right, folks, this has been a blast. Like I say, we could go on for another hour, but hope you could get in on the conversation with yourself while we were talking, because it's
exactly. And if
good
you do
stuff.
what we said and create your own podcast, based only on this idea, give us a shout out, please.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys, for listening. Bye.
Our theme music is by Christopher Piatek.